Fans of the Dark Knight trilogy seem to be like Talia al Ghul when it comes to Bane. They love him, but they're not in love with him. One way or another, Bane seems to get lost in the shadow of the other Dark Knight baddies. Which is understandable, since despite Tom Hardy's best efforts, it's really hard to be afraid of someone when you can't understand what they're saying when they're threatening you.
Dr. Pub refused that offer in favor of yours. We had to find out what he told you about us.
But on this episode, I will show you why, that of the three main villains in the Dark Knight trilogy, Bane is the most difficult and imposing force Batman has to face psychologically. Hello, I'm Willarious the Therapist. Here at the Fictional Character Mental Health Cooperative, we specialize in diagnosing and treating the mental health issues of the unfortunate people who have to exist in the stressful storylines of movies that keep getting sequels. No peaceful retirement for you, Mr. Toretto. You're gonna be fast and furious for frickin' ever. How does that make you feel?
No one knows what it's like to be a fast man.
If you want to help make the fictional universe a happier place one movie starfish at a time, while learning about principles and concepts in mental health, click subscribe to join our treatment team. When I founded the co-op, Mr. Wayne was very much the patient I had in mind. In two previous videos in this series, I outlined my two-point theory. Point one is that Bruce Wayne is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Duh. And two, that the villains Bruce faces in the Dark Knight trilogy are actually manifestations of the symptom clusters of post-traumatic stress disorder, and that he is able to defeat these villains as he overcomes that particular symptom cluster. Now, if you haven't already seen the previous two videos in the series, you can click here to get caught up. For everyone else, we've established that Ra's al Ghul represents Bruce Wayne's hyperreactivity cluster, and that the Joker represents Bruce's avoidance cluster. So now we come to Bane, and the lethal part of Bruce's trauma he represents, the part that broke him. Joker famously claimed to be ahead of the curve, but I think in hindsight, that title belongs to the man who flexes. Constantly wearing a mask that makes him unintelligible, isolating himself with an increasingly angry group of unemployed people, riots and anti-riots. 12. Apparently Bane smoked so much of Raz's purple flower that the dude actually saw the future. But not only is Bane a walking embodiment of one of the worst years in history so far, he is the embodiment of the psychology of terrorism. Pro tip: Christopher Nolan movie antagonists usually give away their game within the first few lines in the movie. Mal Cobb describing her role as Spectre and Tormentor to Dom in the opening.
If I jumped, would I survive?
The Joker answers a question about his morality with a phrase that sounds like it'll be conventional wisdom, but twists at the last second to become nonsense.
I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger.
And so it is with Bane.
It doesn't matter who we are. What matters is our plan. No one cared who I was till I put on the mask.
The first statement defines a central psychological theme shared by members of the League of Shadows, and the second line describes Bruce and Bane's particular relationship to that theme. Let me explain. The League of Shadows is a terrorist organization. The psychology of terrorist organizations and individual terrorists is something that people have been studying since the turn of the century for obvious reasons. Now, based on popular conceptions of both terrorists and psychopathy, like Bruce, you may think of the League of Shadows as
Gang of psychopaths.
But based on what we know about terrorist organizations, that's probably not the case. According to this 2015 literature review that studied common characteristics of violent extremist organizations and the individuals within them, these organizations don't normally recruit people with antisocial personality traits. Which, if you've been following this channel, you can probably guess why. If you're going to involve an antisocial personality in your holy war, you might be able to bring them on as a mercenary if you have a lot of money, but good luck convincing them to die in a plane crash for the cause.
Oh! They expect one of us in the wreckage.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
The cause of an individual embracing extreme beliefs is a complicated set of factors that involves life experiences, personality traits, and qualities of the organizations they join. However, this literature review was able to identify 4 mental qualities that people that get involved with extreme organizations tend to have. One is dualistic thinking, the belief that people and or the world itself are either all good or all bad. Note League members' tendency to divide the world into decent people and criminals, no in between.
Innocent is a strong word to throw around Gotham.
The city has become a breeding ground for suffering and injustice.
Second is paranoia, the belief that specific or unknown entities are at work in the world to do one harm. third is apocalyptic orientation. That is, the belief that global history is a single narrative that is inevitably moving towards conflict.
I've Gotham's reckoning, here to end the borrowed time you've all been living on.
All of these things define members of the League of Shadows and Bruce Wayne, but his conflict with Bane exposes the most important aspect of the cognitive habits of a terrorist, a totalizing conversion experience. This refers to a life event that is so devastating to the person's sense of self that they take on the belief that their old self has died and they have a new self that is completely dedicated to their sense of mission. Bane and Bruce both have totalizing conversion experiences, have a worldview that is dualistic and pessimistic, and based on this pessimism, their identity has been consumed by a sense of mission, so that their respective missions have become more important to them than their sense of self. This is even represented in their masks. While it makes him seem intimidating and superhuman, Bane's mask is essentially a crutch. Without it, he is so beaten down by physical pain he cannot even stand up. His physical situation is a mirror to Bruce's psychological situation. Bruce sacrificed the Batman persona to give a temporary victory to Gotham law enforcement. But without it, he is so beaten down by psychological pain, he has lost the will to live. Bane knows this and uses it to torture him. Based on this, it is clear that Bane represents the cognitive symptoms of Bruce's PTSD. Cognitive symptoms refer to negative beliefs about the self and others as a result of trauma. This is what makes Bane the most imposing of the villains in Nolan's trilogy. In Bruce's fight with Ra's, he was driven by an intoxicating rage that numbed him to his own fear and pain. In The Dark Knight, he went up against Chaos Incarnate, who tried to corrupt the image of Batman's hero archetype. Ra's fought Bruce in his emotions, Joker is fighting Bruce in his fantasy, but Bane fights Bruce in his reality. He knows him, and knows the type of man he has become. And as Bruce lies helplessly in the prison that made Bane who he is, he listens as his adversary says out loud what his pessimistic worldview is saying to his mind. That hope is an illusion, that things won't get better, and that he has nothing to look forward to other than failure and death. For many people recovering from trauma, these beliefs are one of the most difficult things to overcome. The constant backdrop of negative beliefs is like a dark mental prison. Fittingly, the way out is similar to how Bruce gets out of his prison in The Dark Knight Rises. Bruce has used cynicism to keep him safe from the hard fall of disappointment, but his hopelessness is exactly what's keeping him in his cognitive jail.
You used to talk about finishing, about a life beyond that awful cave.
As long as he believes that he's beyond hope and the world is beyond hope, he can't get better. Bruce's final climb can be seen as a metaphor of the decision to engage his life. Without the tether of cynicism, he's willing to take real risk again. And so, Bruce has defeated Bane, and his PTSD has been soundly...
Where did you learn to count?
So my theory was that Bruce's adversaries represent his PTSD symptom clusters, but there are only 3 villains. That's because the last adversary Bruce needs to defeat, the one representing his re-experiencing symptoms, is the Batman himself. As Rachel pointed out in the previous movie, the Batman persona is a coping mechanism for Bruce, but it's also a symptom of his trauma. Batman is a monument to the worst day of Bruce's life. For the better part of his adult life, he's been wrapped in darkness and bats, staring down every criminal that emerges from the shadows of Gotham. By being Batman, he's living that day over and over again. This coping strategy served a purpose at one point. It helped him redirect his anger in a sort of productive activity. But now it has overstayed its welcome. The memory of that day has helped him live out his mission, but it's keeping him from living out his life. And so his final act in the series was letting go of that day and giving himself permission to live. This is what makes the Dark Knight trilogy so much more impactful than many other superhero series that came out from around that time. Bruce's journey through these 3 movies illustrate that his last words to Commissioner Gordon are true in real life. A hero really can be anyone. A hero can be a survivor of childhood abuse finding the courage to be themselves in healthy relationships. A hero can be a military veteran discovering the strength it takes to ask for help. The journey of trauma survival is the hero's journey, and it doesn't require superpowers or a magic hammer. All it takes is the support of people who care, the courage to take emotional risk, and the audacity to give yourself permission to live. Let me know what you think about the Batman PTSD theory in the comments. If you'd like to help support our mission here at the Co-op, check out my Patreon. Doctor-level patrons get videos ad-free a day early, as well as additional privileges here at the Co-op. If you'd like to learn more about the psychology of trauma in movies, click here. I'm Willarious the Therapist. Thanks for watching.